Greetings, this is Uncle Travelling Matt, and welcome to another edition of Pilgrim Places in the British Isles. This is going to be a very short one today, because there's not that much to say, but it is quite a special place, and I do recommend you go along and check it out if you get time. So the place that I'm talking about today is St. Trillo's Chapel, and that is in a place called Rhos-on-Sea on the North Wales coast. So if anybody's visited North Wales, you may be aware of Conway or Llandudno it's often called, and then Colwyn Bay. Well, Rhos-on-Sea is kind of an extension of Colwyn Bay towards Llandudno. And St. Trillo's Chapel is famous because it is the smallest church in the British Isles. It's absolutely tiny. You can literally fit about 6 people in it. And it's this tiny chapel right by the sea. And it's surrounded by this little bit of a garden. And it's almost, hidden by a wall. So if you drive past on the road, you can't see it. But it is there. And it is actually what founded Rhos-on-Sea. And I forget the name of Rhos-on-Sea in Welsh, but it's basically, I think it's something like Trillo or something. It's about St. Trillo's Chapel. Now, St. Trillo was again one of those early saints who we don't know much about. We think probably 5th, 6th century, and he is said to have been a Breton. So he came from Brittany, which is now in northern France, and sailed on his little boat, probably a coracle, and he sailed around Wales to this place on the coast, this deserted spot on the coast, and settled there and preached there and lived there. Now, that story might sound a little bit unbelievable, but it's actually quite common. Wales and Brittany, they speak they did then, very similar languages. Breton is very similar to Welsh. It's part of the Brythonic group of languages along with Cornish, so they're probably been mutually understandable to each other. And in those days it was far easier to travel by boat than it was across land, particularly where there's mountains involved. So somebody crossing over to Cornwall and going around Cornwall and going around Wales is not really unthinkable. And also, of course, that was the earliest part of Great Britain to be evangelized. So there was more Christianity going on in Wales than what is now England at that time. It was pretty pagan. So he would have gone there. Now, where Rhos-on-Sea is at the time was an island. It was a low-lying island, kind of cut off by maybe marshes or a channel from the mainland. So that would have been a special place for him because he could have been alone to contemplate God there. But of course, these days it's it long since silted up and it's become part of the mainland. And it is strange because it's hard to imagine what it would have been like because it's also built up around, it's literally in the middle of a holiday resort. But back then it would have been a very lonely spot amongst the dunes, and they had this low-lying, hunkered down, humble chapel. But even so, I find it really powerful. Whoever keeps the gardens, it's beautiful. It's just this gorgeous display of flowers. And then you go in this small, sacred, earthy space, and it's really intimate. Again, I've talked about this in the past. It's almost like re-entering the room. And you go in there, and there's very little decoration. There's an altar table where people have left their prayers. And there is a small stained glass window of St. Trillo. I think that's more modern. Of course, how old the church is, we can't really say, but it could be very, very early. And if it is medieval, it's pretty much a copy of something that was very early. St. Trillo was never a major saint. There was never a major cult around him. But it is worth remembering that that's how these islands were evangelized, by people like him who travelled along to a lonely place, sat there, preached the faith, prayed, meditated, and, communities grew up around them. And I made a very powerful pilgrimage actually a few years ago when I started walking at St. Trillo's, and then I walked over the Little Orme through Llandudno and then up the Great Orme to St. Tudno's Church. And Llandudno gets its name from St. Tudno. And so it was about an 8-mile walk, and it was really beautiful. And that's something I would recommend to anyone. So yeah, that is St. Trillo's Chapel, a great place to stop and pray and just contemplate right next to the sea. This is Uncle Travelling Matt. Keep travelling.